Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing our starter class guides for World of Warcraft. Today we're going to be talking about the Mage, which is your ranged magic caster. Super flexible, a lot of ways to keep themselves out of trouble, and some really fun, unique tricks that they can employ relative to other classes. These starter guides are meant for people that are coming back to the game with Dragonflight doing so well and wanting to pick the game up again, or they're switching mains to a new class that they may not have that much experience with. So let's dive into the Mage. I play a lot of healers in Arena, so every time I think of mages, I think of pain and suffering because that's what they bring me. But they have 3 specs. They are one of the few classes in the game that is only damage, so they have no hybridization, no tank, no healing, nothing. They have 3 different ways to play, and each of these specializes in a different school of magic. So you have Arcane Mages, Fire Mages, and Frost Mages. Arcane Mages are kind of an in-between Fire and Frost. They have some really cool build-up and some burst moments, but they also have a lot of channeling, proc-based things. Fire is super fast and has like this god mode during combustion. A lot of procs that you'll work off of, so you farm procs, get these big, crazy damage burst windows, and then you'll have downtime when combustion's down. And then Frost is kind of super control. They have a lot of control, a lot of CC. They have a pet, super nice. And then they have moments of really big burst with shatter effects and glacial spike, things like that. But those are the 3 specs that you have. But first, we're going to talk about the core abilities that you have on a mage, the things that you can do that are super cool. And then we'll also go through a little bit on the class tree. If you didn't know, in Dragonflight, the left talent tree is your class tree. This talent tree is available to all specs, almost the same. There's going to be some subtle differences sometimes, depending on whether an ability needs to change or not. But for the most part, you'll have this core available. And then the right talent tree is for your specialization. So that will be specific to the one that you're playing. And then we'll talk about that later. But we'll start by talking about the base kit and some of the class tree, and then we'll go through each of the builds for each of the specs. Now, like most damage classes that are just pure damage, most of them have some unique thing that no one else has, and many of the things that the mage has. One of them is summoning consumables, so they can actually create a table for their teammates that allow them to get conjured food. They can also conjure food for themselves, which is useful. It means that you never really need food to recover mana or HP. Pretty useful while leveling, especially since you don't really have that many ways to heal yourself anyways. And they also have portals. They can teleport or they can create portals. And these are very easy ways for them to create a portal to a specific location. You will get one for every new expansion. So just like in the last expansions, you'll get one for Valdrakken, which will allow you to teleport there, which is super nice. You can create portals for your teammates. You can teleport yourself there. It's a nice way to get around. They also are one of the few classes that have Bloodlust, so they're able to activate this. Super useful and sought after, especially in smaller groups like M+. You always want at least one class with Bloodlust, and Mage is one of them. Now, let's talk about the class tree. You're going to have, and the reason I don't go too much in detail just yet is because your abilities and your functions will change quite drastically depending on what spec you choose. So you actually play quite differently with each of these. There are some basic shared things. A lot of them are in the class tree. You do have ways to CC targets. You can, Nova, things like that. But for the most part, your class core kit will come from the talent tree, and then most of your playstyle will come from the spec tree. So let's jump into the class tree. The first one is you're going to get some kind of armor. This changes based on what spec you're playing. If it's prismatic or it's fire or it's frost armor, the general idea here is you have a cooldown on it. It allows you to absorb some kind of damage. So depending on what your spec you're playing, right now I have Arcane equipped, so you'll be able to pop the barrier up, and this will change, but it's in the same slot and it does essentially the same thing. The next one is going to be your ice block. This one is huge. This is your core survivability for Mage. You pop it up, you become immune to damage. There are ways to modify this, which is nice, and then you can have things that it's a long cooldown, but it allows you to immune some things. It can be useful for pulling big pulls if you want to just go and grab a bunch of mobs, and then you ice block as they're all grouping up together. When the ice block ends, you can freeze them all, get some distance, and then do some damage, depending on what spec you're playing, but this is your bread and butter. You're going to want this. Next is Mirror Image. This one is going to be another defensive ability. You activate it. You create mirror images. They will mimic you, and then they will also they can take damage, and your damage taken is reduced. This is kind of like another defensive cooldown. If you get in trouble and there's too many mobs, you can pop this up and it can help you in that way. Another thing is going to be Rune of Power. This one is pretty core to most mage specs. You put it on the ground. When you're standing on it, you get the spell damage increase. When you step off of it, you lose it. So this is kind of, this is really big in raid gameplay because you have to leave your Rune of Power after using it. It's kind of a pain in the butt. But while leveling, you're going to pull a group, put it all together, pop down your Rune of Power, and do bonus damage. You're going to have ways to mass polymorph. You can run this if you want. It's not crazy useful because when you damage a polymorph target, it'll break out. But it is nice to be able to get some extra business going on there. The other defensives you're going to have is invisibility. This is a pretty long cooldown. You can actually get greater invisibility as well. But this is like you're kind of in trouble. You're screwed. You pop invisibility. You can modify it to give you movement speed. Then you go stealth or invisible. And you can drop aggro from targets, which is really nice. And get yourself out of that. So it's another self tool. Again, you don't have crazy amounts of healing. You don't have a tank spec. So being able to use your tools in a crafty way is your biggest benefit. The other one is Alter Time. One of my favorite abilities in the entire game. Super fun. This one is, it just has so many applications. It's really, really cool. So when you activate this, you have Alter Time up, right? You see this effect going on and you can see a little like blur over there. When you're done, you can revert back to where you were. But what's cool about this is it will revert back your health as well. So pop Alter Time, take a bunch of damage, do a bunch of things, pop back, revert your health to where it was, and you're good to go. And then you can modify it as well to have a shorter cooldown and that kind of thing. And then when you alter back, you can reduce the cooldown of your blink, which is super cool. Then for more CC and control, you'll pick up Blast Wave and Ice Nova. You can run Ring of Frost if you want. It's an incapacitate. I haven't found it to be all that useful while leveling. Super good in PvP. One of the best. Oh my God. It's rough. So basically what the way Ring of Frost works is it creates a threshold. Anything that crosses the threshold gets frozen. And it does count as incapacitate. But Blast Wave is super nice. It is an AoE that does damage. It knocks back and it slows, which is cool. It can be really useful for getting a whole bunch of mobs away. So again, you know, bring them all together, freeze them when they catch up. You can slow them down. And then when they get really close, you can Blast Wave them away. Then you have Ice Nova, which is really cool. This one works on hitting the target, and then it'll do a pulse on top of it. And then it'll slow and freeze targets on top, or just freeze targets as it hits. So that's super cool. Very good control. And then as you level, I would recommend just going down this tree. The reason being is you get greater invisibility, which is useful. It has damage reduction on it as well, so if you get in trouble. The main reason why I think leveling it's so good to go down here is you want to pick up Time Anomaly. This works for all specs. It gives you a chance of proccing your proc. All 3 specs rely on procs in some way. And I think this one's just super great for leveling, having these available all the time, which is really nice. You will be making use of Shifting Power, which is a Night Fae ability that we got in Shadowlands. Super cool. It'll reset your cooldowns for in between pulls or even during a pull if you want. Fire probably benefits the most from it, but you can run it if you want for Arcane and Frost. You also want to pick up Energized Barriers. This one's so nice. So it does 2 things. One is that when you get hit with a barrier up, which is what we talked about earlier, you pop up your barrier depending on what spec you're running. If you get hit, you have a chance to give yourself clear casting. And when you cast your barrier, it removes all snare effects. So if you're being slowed, you got dazed or something, you can pop up your barrier. Not only does it give you the buff, the defense of the shield, but it also removes snares, which is super nice. You can also run Dragon's Breath. Anything down here is okay. This one is nice. There's another AoE Disorient. Meteor gives some AoE, and then Displacement can teleport you back. But I still think down this middle tree is probably going to be your best because you're getting a lot of these talents anyways. Okay, now let's talk about specs. Arcane, Fire, and Frost. We have a basic understanding of how Mage works and how they function. Let's talk about the 3 different specs. I will give you a build. It'll give you a link down in the description below. You just copy this string, Control-V it into your game, give it a name, and you got yourself a leveling build. This is just the build for each of them, and we'll give it to each of these. So let's start with Arcane, which is kind of, I would consider Fire and Frost 2 ends of the spectrum, and then Arcane's like a little bit in the middle. Fire is super mobile, high burst, high proc spamming. Frost is more control and more focused on getting them pinned down in the right spot and hitting them with a big icicle. And then Arcane's kind of in the middle where they do have some cool cool procs. Now, if you want to level Arcane, I would recommend leveling Frost. It's probably the best leveling experience overall. But Arcane is fine too. The only thing I don't like about Arcane is it gets kind of dull while leveling. It's still incredibly effective. In most expansions, Arcane has just been spamming Arcane Missile over and over and over. You do have some really cool procs that make it so when you do things like Arcane Barrage, you get movement speed, you can slow targets. It does speed up pretty well. And then if you want to, you can also do Arcane Blast over and 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 over. And then when you need single target, you have two major tools with Arcane Orb, which is super cool. You put that down, it'll stay in place at the end there, and then you have Arcane Surge as well. So you have big boom, 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 bah, 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 bah. You can do lots of crazy damage. It's very effective. You're crazy mobile. You have lots of really cool things you can do, and you can channel and do all that. But it does get a little repetitive, at least for me in general. But for leveling, and the big thing to keep in mind while you're leveling, well, I guess two main things. The first is going to be your Arcane Charges, which is a resource unique to Arcane. You can see it down here underneath my health bar is the amount of charges that I have. When you use some abilities, you will gain Arcane Charges, and then you can spend them in specific ways on specific abilities, which is really nice. And then you can also get procs of Clear Casting. Clear Casting is super nice. You'll be able to use it in many ways. For each 250 mana you spend, you have a chance to gain Clear Casting, which makes your next Arcane Missiles or Arcane Explosion channel faster, which is super nice. So you have that, and then actually we just got one just now. So it costs no mana, and you get an extra faster channel on this, which is kind of why the build just you just spam this over and over and over and over. And you can get some crazy single target damage. And then you have ways to get Clear Casting as well. One of those, if it'll let me bring this up, is going to be your mana gem. So you can conjure a mana gem, which is pretty cool. You conjure it up. The big thing that you'll want to get as you level up, though, is when you have your mana gem and it's ready to go and you consume it, it gives you mana. But if you run Cascading Power, it means that when you consume it, you get 2 Clear Casting stacks, which can then, you can just, honestly just consume, stack, spend Arcane Missile, Arcane Missile, Arcane Missile, Arcane Missile, that kind of thing. So you want to use basically Arcane Missile. It's available if you have Clear Casting. If there's Clear Casting, you Arcane Missile. That's it. That's what you do. Do it now and don't look back. If you don't have any Arcane Charges, these 4 charges here, I would recommend Arcane Orb. You can also make it get stuck on a wall or kind of hit it against something. Gives you a bunch of charges, and then you'll have full charges. Then, if you have charges, go to Arcane Barrage. What's cool about this is Arcane Barrage does arcane damage to the enemy, but for each charge, it deals bonus damage and hits an additional nearby target. So if you have charges and you have AoE, you can throw out the Arcane Barrage, get some really nice damage out there, and it works really well, gives you some nice AoE and uses up your charges. And remember, we'll be running Chrono Shift, which means that when you Arcane Barrage, it slows the target and gives you a burst of movement speed. So if you have your Arcane Charges up, you throw out the Barrage, you do some extra cleave damage on it, and it makes you go zoom, 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 boom, you get Chrono Shift. You're zooming around, you're blinking, you got all kinds of crazy things. You got some decent movement speed with Arcane on top of that. And then if you need to kill a big mob or a big pull, use your Arcane Orb to build up charges and then pop up Arcane Surge. What's cool about this, it's basically your big cooldown for Arcane. You pop up Arcane Surge. It'll start by dealing damage. So you pop this up, it'll let me there. Boom, so you got that going. So you'll expend up all your mana and you'll do more damage based on how much mana you spent. And you'll get some Clear Casting, whatever, but you can start doing some crazy damage. And then once you're done with that, for the next 15 seconds, you get an Arcane Surge buff, which increases your spell damage and mana regeneration. So you'll blow all your mana, then you'll start building it up. You can also run things like Evocation as well, which allow you to just channel up all your mana, get it back, and then for the next time you get your Arcane Surge, you can spend it, and then you're just back to the same thing. You pop it, get Arcane Charges, spam your Arcane Missiles if you have Clear Casting. If you're running anything that builds Clear Casting, like for example, you can spam Arcane Blast, which can give you Clear Casting as well. Pop this up, and you can generate charges that way. Then once you have it, you spam Clear Casting, doing all that. If there's AoE, you want an Arcane Barrage for cleave. If you have 4 or more targets, 4 or 5, you can Arcane Explosion, and it will be efficient. And you can use your Clear Casting on that. And then anything less than that, You can just be using Arcane Barrage for speed, zoom around, you know, use your defenses, that sort of thing. You're good to go. So there it is. And again, if you're looking for this build, I have a link, a string down in the description. You can import in the game and you can have that for Arcane. Now let's talk about Fire. It's probably my least favorite to level as for all the mage specs. And that's one main reason. I think it's super fun in PvP. It's definitely one of the more fun PvP specs. It's fun in PvE, especially in Raid. A lot of cool options in Mythic Plus, burn things down. But the reason I don't like it for leveling is it's very combustion based. It's very cooldown based. So you pop your combustion, which makes it so you all have critical strike, and you can do castable all those spells. You have like pyros, you can pop it up, pop your combustion. But if you don't have procs and you don't have good gear from leveling and you don't have combustion, it can feel really slow. Whereas Frost has very consistent speed, good damage, good control, nice AoE. Arcane can get really fast and spammy and blah, 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 arcade style. Fire has these big highs and big lows, and I generally don't like playing those kinds of specs when leveling because I kind of want to be as high as I can be constantly all the time. It's why I usually level as tanks as well. It's just so easy. But Fire is there. So if you're looking for a leveling build, I'll put this in the description. A little import so you can copy it, you can put it in. Bagnon's yelling at me. You can just import it into your game. Get this in there, boom, 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 get that. There you go, it's in the description. So let's talk about Fire, some of the more important aspects, some basic combos, what to look for and how to play. So you'll want to take advantage of as much CC as you can. So unlike Arcane where you can burst things down, or Frost where you control everything, you do want to be using your core kit like Blast Wave, knock targets back and slow them. You want to use your Ice Nova to lock them in place. And then I would recommend also going for slow plus mass slow, which means that when you slow a target, it slows all targets around it. You can still use Frost Nova and keep everything in place while you kite around. And then you'll get these windows where you can pop combustion or you have some nice procs. You can use Flame Strike for AoE, Phoenix Flames for AoE, which is nice. And then you can really start burning them down. But it still suffers from the same issues that we talked about earlier. And when it comes to leveling, I would look at abilities like Incendiary Eruptions, super fun. This has a small chance to add Living Bomb, even if you don't have it. It adds it to the target when you are damaging them with Flame Patch, which is an AoE that goes off when you Flame Strikes. You put this down, boom, there goes the Flame Strike, and then when you're done, it have this Fire Patch that'll apply damage, and then you have a chance to apply Living Bomb to them when you're running that perk, which is pretty cool. Now, a lot of your gameplay is going to rely on something called Hot Streak. You'll hear this talk a lot about. You see, we don't have any Arcane charges here like we did with Arcane, but Hot Streak is kind of your big proc farmer, or one of them. When you get 2 crits in a row on a direct damage spell, it'll give you Hot Streak, which makes your Pyroblast or your Flame Strike instant and cause double ignite damage. So Pyroblast normal cast time is 2.7 seconds. It's long. It's a long time. But when you get instant procs and it hits really dang hard, or if you're doing AoE, you can do Flame Strike, it makes things a lot nicer. So you're playing off Hot Streak, and then there's different ways that you can modify this. Hyperthermia is one of them. When it activates, you have a low chance to cause all Pyroblasts and Flame Strikes to have no cast time and crit for the next 5 seconds. So when you get 1 Hot Streak, it's like getting a supercharged Hot Streak for the next 5 seconds, which can be super nice, especially for AoEs. Spam a bunch of Flame Strikes. You can run with your Hot Patches, gives you a higher chance for your Flame Patch to cause a Living Bomb, or you can just do a whole bunch of Pyroblasts on one target. And you can also tell that when you are running, if this is the core of your character, Hot Streaks are one of them, 2 crits in a row, Combustion makes it so all of your spells crit. So you can obviously proc all kinds of Hot Streaks and get lots of bursts. You can start to see how that proc-based window of high damage starts to come together for Fire, which I think fits the thematic of Fire really well. So a basic rotation would be like this. There's a few things you want to keep track of. The first thing is, if you haven't casted Fireball in 8 seconds, your next Fireball will deal bonus damage and have reduced cast time. So while you have Flame Accelerant, make sure you cast that Fireball. It'll be super fast and give you a bonus. And then while you're leveling, since no one's going to be interrupting you, you can kind of just spam Pyroblast until you get a crit. Once you get a crit, you'll get Heating Up, which means your next spell will give you your Hot Streak. And if you ever get that proc, right? If you see Flame Accelerant, throw the Fireball out. If you get a crit, get Heating Up. and then know that Fire Blast will always deal a critical strike. So if you get heating up, you can Fire Blast. This will give you Hot Streak. Then you can spam out another Fireball or a Pyroblast, which will be instant and do more ignite damage. So that's what you're doing when you see this buff appear. Throw out the Fireball and then just spam Pyroblast. If you get a crit, Fire Blast to get the free crit, then go back to Pyroblast, and then just keep building it up that way. And if you have Hyperthermia and you see Hyperthermia proc, then for the next 5 seconds, just spam Pyroblast if it's single target. If it's AoE, just spam Flame Strikes, and just make sure you're paying attention to this. This, again, it's very proc based. You're paying attention to what procs you have, what buffs you have, and you're reacting to them properly. But if you get Hyperthermia, Pyroblast for single target, Flame Strike for AoE. And normally for AoE, I actually wouldn't change the rotation at all. You just want to, if you have Flame Accelerant, throw out the free Fireball, super nice, and then you spam Pyroblast on one target until you get a proc Fireblast, or throw out your Fireblast to get that done, and then throw this out. And then while they're standing in this, when you have Hot Patch, just freeze them in place, and if anything's still alive, you can spam Arcane Explosion if there's 4 targets. If there's less, you can just kind of go back, throw out a Flame Strike, or just doing some single target on top of that. You do have Phoenix Flames, which is nice as well. You can throw this out. It'll hit one target and then spread to nearby targets, which is super useful. So use this when you have some targets built up or you just want to bring them in and pull them in. But it's the same rotation. You're just doing AoEs with Flame Strikes. Trigger your Hyperthermia. And then if you have a big pull, do Combustion, which will give you lots of hot streaks. Boom, 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 big boom, boom, boom. And then use these 2 for AoE, and then use these for crit. And the last thing I'll leave you with for fire is Searing Touch. This one's actually really nice for leveling. It's kind of like a Shadow Word Death, but when you have a target that's below 30% health, Scorch should light up, and then you'll do 150% increased damage with Scorch. This one isn't super useful while leveling. It's a nice fast cast, an easy way to build up procs and trying to do that. But I think Fireball, if you're running that modification down below into Pyroblast for damage, super nice. But just be aware that if the target gets low, you can finish them off with a Super Scorch if you're running that extra talent down here with Searing Touch. If you're looking for this build, it'll be down below. You can copy it. Bagnon, stop yelling at me. You can boom, get it in, type it in, you got yourself a build. Lastly, let's talk about Frost Mage. Very control heavy, lots of CC. You can run with a pet if you want with the water elemental, but you do have some options in here which are really nice. And I would say Frost is probably the most enjoyable leveling experience. I would put Frost first, Arcane second, Fire last, but they all work just fine for leveling. You can play whatever it is that you want to play. So let's talk about Frost, how to level with Frost, and the general basics of the class spec. The core of Frost Mage really is getting the target slowed with Frost and then dealing damage to them. The main reason being is that you're going to have Shatter, which is it multiplies the critical strike chance of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5 and additional crit chance. So you get some crazy big burst in that window. The big weakness is if you're facing a mob that cannot be slowed, then you can't do that extra bonus, but you have a safeguard against that in Fingers of Frost. So Frost Orb, Frozen Orb, and Frost Bolt have a chance to give you Fingers of Frost. There's other ways to proc this as well. But when you have it, your damage on your next Ice Lance will deal damage as if the target is frozen. So at least you get ways to do it. The Ice Lance damage is tripled against frozen targets. So really, Ice Lance is all about hitting a target that's frozen and getting that extra damage on them. Slowing them down in any way that you possibly can. Would also recommend pulling a decent amount. You're very good at kiting. You have a lot of control. You can run things like Ring of Frost, Ice Nova, Blast Wave. You still have all of those that you would have with the other specs, but you also have ways to cleave. So you have things like Splitting Ice here, which makes your Ice Lance and Icicles now do cleave damage. So they hit another target. Super useful. On top of that, Frozen Orb and Blizzard are going to be used regularly. They slow targets, they give you the frost effect, your Ice Lance already cleaves, and then you have tons of AoE coming down from that. So you're going to be doing this no matter what. You're going to have tons of ways to do cleave damage, and you have a lot of slow and control, and you have bonus to targets that are slowed and controlled. So pull a couple mobs, try to grab maybe 2 or 3 every time, and maybe even if you're feeling comfortable, push your limits and see how big of a pull you can manage with Frost. So let's talk about what abilities to use as you're leveling. Again, the core of what you're doing is you want to make sure that they are frozen. There's a few ways to do that. So if you have Frozen Orb available, this is going to be your bread and butter. It does have a 1-minute cooldown, but it is super nice. You throw it out, it's going to slow everything. get those procs out, and that means when you have these, you'll get extra bonus damage on them. It'll shatter. Super nice. It also has the benefit, it lasts quite a while too, relative to the Arcane Orb, but it also has the nice benefit of the first time it deals damage, it will actually apply, give you Fingers of Frost, which is a nice little way to get bonus damage on that. You know that's going to get that proc there. So throw out your frozen orb if there's targets in range and it's off cooldown. Then if you have a frozen target, just spam Ice Lance over and over and over. If they are not frozen, Ice Lance is going to be pretty weak. So the other thing you can use is use Flurry. This is at the top of your talent tree up here. This is the other way to get chill on them, but you'll unleash Flurry of Ice on the target, and then you'll apply Winter's Chill, which causes the target to take damage from your spells as if it were frozen. So another way to get Fingers of Frost. It's a debuff on the target rather than the buff that's on you from Fingers, but you can pop this, deal extra bonus. You have Winter's Chill on it, then you can start doing your big damage. You can see the damage between a target that's frozen and a target that isn't. The Ice Lance becomes pretty pitiful. So you're throwing your Frost Orb. If they're frozen, you spam this. If they're not, you can throw out Flurries. If you have a stack ready, it's available, you have Winter's Chill on it, throw that out, and then you just use your Ice Lance. Super straightforward. And then if you have nothing else on single target, you can throw out your Frost Bolts. It's another way to kind of hit the target, do a little bit of damage, get that chill on there, but just remember that you're not going to be able to... it doesn't do as damage as the Ice Lance, and it does have the cast time on it if the target's frozen. Then if it's AoE, you have a good number of targets, like 3+, then you can start working in Blizzard. This is the cast time, you put it down, you put the AoE, but otherwise the rotation stays the same. If you have Frozen Orb, throw it out. If it's AoE, throw down the Blizzard, get the Frozen Orb down there, spam your Ice Lance to kill targets. Very easy, very straightforward. And then if there are 4 or more targets, you can use Arcane Explosion as well, just to burn down some extra targets, get that damage on there. Throw out the Blizzard. If you have the extra proc, you get some extra freeze target damage on it. You can also throw out Cone of Cold, which is nice. Get some extra little damage there. And then the Pull, which is the same for all 3 specs. Now the class tree is built in here. Pull a bunch of mobs, ice blocks, you don't take any damage. Let them all pool up. When the ice block is done, you can pop out, Ice Nova, blink away. And then when they're in target range here, you can just Blizzard, throw it out, throw out the ice, your Frozen Orb, and then just start spamming them. Get the bonus damage on top of it. Flurry if they don't have if you don't have the Frozen for the proc, and that's it. That's basically it. You have the same CC, same DPS things that you can use. And then if you want to, I put this as a basic build, Lonely Winter, just because it's easy. You have less things to worry about. But if you want the extra challenge, Summon Water Elemental is really good. You get some ranged Frost Novas, which is nice. And you can actually get some really good damage out of them as well. So you can run the Water Elemental. It is just something else to manage. And I know this is a beginner's guide. So if you're just looking for beginner stuff, this is your Water Elemental. Boom, you get some really cool things. And then you can, once this mana gets built up, you can pop things up here. The big thing is Water Jet is super strong. You get a lot of crazy amounts of damage out of this. It will build up, and then once he has mana, you can do ranged Frost Novas. Super good, super easy. You get some good damage out of that as well. So Frost is the one I would recommend leveling, but if you want to, you can play Arcane, you can play Fire. They're all equally good. They're all equally fun. Very enjoyable. And then if you want the build, it'll be down in the description. All you gotta do is copy it, the string that's down there, paste it into game, and then give it a name, and you're good to go. So that's Mage. Grats to all you Mage mains out there. Super fun, very reliable, great damage. A lot of tools in the toolkit. So overall, just really great class. If you're looking for other class guides from me, I have some on the channel. If there's more that you want, if you would like to see M+, Raid, PvP Arena, other guides for WoW or other games, let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like, and if you have any questions or comments for me, stop by my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Good luck out there. Hope you have good drops. Hope you have some good fun. Cheers. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.